Okay, welcome everybody, and well, good morning and good evening and good night. There are people joining us today from, I think, 10 different countries. So wherever you are, it's great to have you on board. So this is another international session of Nuffield Talks. We've been doing these now since the beginning of COVID, the coronavirus. And we've been doing them as a split session, sometimes in Portuguese and sometimes in English. So it's being hosted by Nuffield Brazil. And the idea is to really just make the most of this wonderful network that Nuffield has around the world. It's an organization, a not-for-profit organization that's been going for 70 years now. And we have over 2,000 Nuffield scholars, over this course of time. There's a presence in 40 different countries, and one of the main ways that we connect and grow leaders and people that make great things happen is through a scholarship program. So we've got one of our speakers tonight is Thato. She's a Nuffield scholar. We've also got Peter. Thato was a 2017 Nuffield scholar. Peter was a 1990 Nuffield scholar, and Aline is part of Bom Futuro, which is an investor here in Brazil. So the commitment that Nuffield has is to develop the resource that is most essential for agribusiness, and that's people. So we have this very practical program where people leave their nest, leave their own environment, and travel around the world with different people or by themselves to look for meaningful answers to solve key challenges that they're facing in their own countries. I think one of the things that's really special about Nuffield is that we're connected by a set of values. So we're talking tonight about leadership in agriculture, and we'll touch on some of the technical aspects on that. But one of the special things that I think we achieve through Nuffield is being connected by a sense that we can have courageous conversations amongst us. We can talk about the things that matter, whether we know the answers is probably, well, if we think we know the answers, perhaps we don't. But it's about having some frank conversations and challenging our own values and creating the space for us to grow and find meaningful solutions. So that's what we're going to do today. We've got three really special people that have really, different backgrounds and also from different countries. We've got Peter from Australia, who's a farmer. You've met them all through their biographies when you registered. We've got Peter from Australia, who's a farmer, been involved in various leadership groups, both in the sector and also in community. We've got Aline from Brazil and Thato from South Africa, so two BRICS countries, doing some interesting things for global economy and also for agribusiness. Thato's just come back from her scholarship program over the last 2 years, and Aline is part of a special family and a special group that have been one of the first investors kind of banking this program here in Brazil. So apart from the work that they do, they're all involved in really interesting things. Thato's been part of the UN agricultural and food organization committee, at a global level, and Aline is doing some interesting things in her state to connect the conversations about agriculture through to community and in an everyday way. So that's they're going to be doing most of the talking tonight. They answer your questions. So our format is really informal and dynamic. From about a minute's time, my job is just to direct their questions. So everyone that's listening on the chat, say hi, tell us where you're from, what city, what country, and then you can just start making your questions whenever you feel like it. And just introduce myself. I'm sorry, my name's Sally. I am an Australian. I've been living in Brazil for 7 years, and I'm part of the founding group that started Nuffield Brazil. And yeah, that's about it. The other thing I should just mention is the sponsors that we have here in Brazil. Nuffield is not possible without having companies and individuals that believe in our vision. So we really must thank Tia Craft, Bom Futuro, Biotrigo, New Farm, and Starter, and Hibasol, who have been helping us achieve what we've done to date in Brazil. So thanks to those companies. So I think let's get started, hey? Enough talking from me. If you'd like to, oh, let me just tell you one thing, that Peter, I'll just say, so Peter's a good morning from, it's 5 o'clock in Australia. So thanks, Peter, for coming on board. Aline, it's a bit more relaxed, it's 6 o'clock in Brazil, and for Thato, it's 11 p.m. in South Africa. So it really does show how global and how different things are. So let's get started. Leadership in agriculture, local actions for a wider impact. But before we get talking about some practical examples, it's good just to get clear on what exactly are we talking about when we talk about leadership. So if I can just start, Peter, but could you give us your view on what is leadership and what does it look like?
Well, good morning to you, Sally, from Western Australia. As you know, the others in the east are up 2 hours ago, but we sleep in the Western Australia. Look, Sally, it's a really interesting question, this, and I think, you know, many people have different ideas, but to me, as often is the case in language, a lot of the clues are in the word itself, is leadership. And you can start with the word leader. Of course, to lead, you need to be able to know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you can't lead. So that sort of, to me, is one of the great clues about this whole topic. And leadership takes many forms. It's from politics, even down to your own family, you can lead. And whatever you do in life, there's a role for leadership, even if you're only leading one other person. So if we think it in that context, you know, it is quite a broad subject. And without pinching, you know, what you might ask other people, but to me, there's characteristics that flow out of that. And for starters, you need good morals and ethics to drive, principles to drive and lead you along the path. You need vision, obviously, which we've just been talking about. Where are you going? You need diplomacy to be able to work with other people of different ideas and skills. And really often you need courage, and in certain circumstances you need great courage. So look, there's just my initial thoughts on the subject, and we might pass on to someone else.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, Aline, so in your view then, what Peter's given us a couple of his, but what skills or attributes do you think a leader needs to be effective?
Yeah, even though we are far away, I think our thoughts could connect somehow, because I also believe that being able to have a vision and making and being able to make others see what you are seeing. Yeah, and even though it's not happening already. And another thing that I quote here is continuous development. And I think that is somehow related to, even though we are grateful for where we are, is a little bit of unhappiness together. So like I'm here and this is a beach house, but we stay here, like one day we are happy, oh my God, thank you for this house. And the second day we are, what are we going to do on this thing to make it different? So yes, I don't know how to say that in English, inconformidade. Is unhappy? No, not unhappy.
It's like uncomfortable or a little...
Like not being shaped. Yeah, unshaped. I don't know. Yeah. And being brave. Yeah, not being afraid of failure. Right, Peter? To be courage. And be courage. And the last thing is to being able to invest in building a team. Otherwise, we'll be just vision and thoughts without people to help you. So yeah, that it for me is one of the key things for a person to be a leader.
Thank you, Aline. And Thato, welcome to the conversation. So how do you think people develop leadership skills then, Thato?
Well, just to touch on what Peter said about family, I think that's very important, how people grow up and how we assume our roles and responsibility in the family context is a good way that from a young age we learn to be responsible. And, you know, once we are responsible, then some sort of leadership, especially when you grow up with siblings, you know, there needs to be people who can take leadership and, you know, show that the other children that, you know, how things work in the household. And I think from that early discipline, I think then developing and just touching on what Aline said in terms of always constantly improving yourself, I think education is a very good platform for a leader to be able to access, you know, from be it learning different languages to being able to communicate effectively, being, you know, skilled in their own craft and, you know, being able to always continually inspiring to the next level, you know, learning new technologies, learning new ways, how being, you know, inquisitive to how things work around the world, how things could work for you in your own environment. And I think one thing that is very important in the development of leadership is mentorship, to say there's always people that come into your life that, you know, have an important role to play in some step of you, you know, being able to lead. And I think it's very important that we are able to, you know, work on that medium of mentorship, be it women being mentored, be it, you know, a professor in the university, or even platforms such as Nuffield, where you can be able to draw on people and ask for advice in their own personal environment. And I think that humbleness that someone can be able to, you know, reach out to someone and to solve solutions in their immediate environment is a good example of how we should lead and heed the call. And I think, you know, developing a leader is also being forced in situations where you need to be able to communicate with people from different backgrounds, understanding where people come from, so you can be able to, you know, disseminate information effectively, being able to, you know, communicate with them and make sure that they understand you, be it for business or personal or political reasons. But I think those are some of the things that help in the development of leadership.
Wonderful, great. Okay, well, maybe we'll jump. I'm sure people are curious about your personal experiences. Peter, we might go back to you, and could you tell us along your journey, tell us about some of the highlights that have happened to you around leadership development, and some of the things that you've learned and how you've learned them in your leadership journey so far.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, Sally, leading up to this. And in fact, in many ways, mine started when I was still at school. I was lucky enough to hold some senior positions at school. And as a consequence of that, you know, you'd be constantly standing up in front of your fellows, whether it's from a roll call to a whole range of things. It gave you confidence to be in yourself and being able to hold yourself in front of your contemporaries and and if you like, to perform on that stage. And I guess throughout my life, it's gone through these small steps in building up. And often, you know, I think, and it's true that, you know, if you can't learn how to lead from, as we were talking about, and Thato mentioned as well, in the family, if you can't lead your local kindergarten or golf club or something like that, you can't build up you've got to take those steps before you can stand for Parliament or even go on to greater things as that. So you need to learn the basics of leadership very early in your life, how to encourage people, to give them direction in their lives even. So it's a cumulative impact across life. And you know, I very much enjoyed my time with Nuffield in that sense, and that you know, that this is an organisation that's sort of born to create leaders, and the way we can conduct Nuffield, give people this worldwide experience, to travel, to gain self-confidence, to speak with people that in paddy fields, through to people that are sitting in Senate roles in Washington, DC. You know, you as a person grow, you gain confidence, and these are all key building blocks in your journey towards better leadership.
Thank you. Aline, what can you add on this comment? Some highlights or some key learnings along your personal experience?
When Peter was talking, I was remembering when there was just always a trouble, a fight or something, and I stood. I was not, I mean, being able to be with my mouth shut, like, even though, yeah, and somehow you were exposed. Yeah, so your first acts are not being afraid of this exposure. I mean, to be exposed, you're self-exposed. And another thing is, I remember myself being very curious, and even though sometimes you are doing stupid questions, your curiosity is bigger than this. You're afraid of making a stupid question, and I believe that this curiosity, I don't know if we could build curiosity. Yeah, that is something that I don't have an answer for that, but I believe that this being able to talk to different people, as well as Thato previously commented, that is something that you gain a lot. It's enrich your speech and your knowledge, and I believe that helps too. Yeah, could I make myself clear?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious about if there's some personal highlights for you, you know, in the things that you've done so far in your life that have stood out as a leadership learning opportunity, or whether it's within yourself or by being with somebody else that you've seen like, wow, that's really meaningful for me.
Yeah, I believe that good connections. Yeah, and I you're asking me, did I get the point? I mean, what helped me to develop a leadership skill? Yeah, is that what? Yeah. I believe that when you don't see where you are going, you don't need actually to discover everything by yourself. And that's the good thing about having good relationships and good connections and building a network, is that this thing that happened after we met Nuffield, for example, during the visits, even though we are in the middle of Mato Grosso, in the middle of Brazil, is the moment where we have connection to the whole world, right? So you have there is where you get curiosity, for example, and where you put on the practice of talking to different people and building your vision. And yeah, that is something that I could complement. Did you get what I? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, thank you. And Thato, in terms of what you've been involved with so far, what are some of the things that have stood out for you in terms of leadership development? You know, some of your experiences.
I think from my personal experience, I could share sort of how Nuffield has impacted my own confidence, as well as the platform that I can be able to speak on. And I think that being as the first South African Nuffield scholar, there was a lot of curiosity from people to really understand what is Nuffield about, you know, what does Nuffield do, how does Nuffield impact, you know, people. And I think those that that I was able to share with and share the journey with saw that me being just a farmer, you know, a lady in the middle of Limpopo, had a lot of meaning and had a lot of impact. And I think that's what sort of took me aback, because I didn't expect people to react to me that way. I just thought that, you know, I'm just a farmer. But now it took me to a platform to say, yes, you are a farmer, but you're also a young farmer. You also represent females, a woman, and you also represent women of color. And those have so many different issues to address. And it really forced me to internalize, what does that mean? And what are the challenges of people that I necessarily represent? So when I came back from my Nuffield experience, I really went on the ground and started interacting more with farmers locally, understanding what shared challenges we had, how people can start working together to be able to leverage off each other. And I think that was very eye-opening, because people also wanted to hear about my experiences and, you know, help them, advise them, and also, you know, sort of share with them that as a young farmer, you don't need to live in isolation. You can, you know, go out, go in social networks, chat with other farmers. You can, you know, go out and communicate with people of your daily challenges. And those are the things that help us, you know, contribute to policies. Those are the things that help us contribute to how private sector might be funding, you know, the next year. And I think the more that we have good representation of people that can be able to transverse from farm level up to, you know, and still communicate at a political and social level, and really stamp, you know, that there is an economic need for us farmers to, you know, be well skilled, and, you know, sharp, to be able to take, you know, agriculture to the next level. And I think that's very much needed in developing countries. And that's what I've realized through my Nuffield journey. It's been a very humbling experience, I must say. And I'm very happy that I went through it. It's taking me on a different path that I never expected. And I'm looking forward to, you know, having stories like Peter to say, you know, I've been in this organization for this period of time, and this is, you know, how I've been able to hear other people's stories, but also these are the stories that I've heard. I think that's a nice thing about Nuffield.
Mm. And following on from that, can you just give us some specific examples of what's happening in your local world now? Some of the you know, the practical activities that you're developing leadership skills in others, or that you're trying to implement to grow the leadership and the results.
So we've been very focused on seeing how we can be able to train young agripreneurs, find out ways that we can, you know, get students who don't have access to land to be able to have experiential learning platforms that they can, you know, communicate and interact with commercial farmers, because it's pretty segmented here. You know, there's a lot of agricultural graduates, but you know, they don't have ownership, and they're pretty marginalized. So they don't have access to doing agriculture. So they end up falling behind and not being, you know, in production. So we're finding that we need to really support young farmers, and we really need to, you know, find ways we can have mechanisms so that support young farmers. And so recently I was appointed by the president to be an advisor and in a land reform panel for the presidency. And that was a good opportunity to get in the voices of young people on land reform issues, and basically how we can use land reform as a tool for social cohesion instead of a political, mandate. So that was a very interesting a panel to be able to contribute to, and really hearing the voices of young people and women on the ground, and really how we can be able to get women to have land tenure. How can we incentivize young farmers to get into agriculture instead of, just because obviously urban spaces offer more opportunities for young people. So it's leaving a huge gap to say that we have an aging population of farmers. So being able to, be active in both policy and being able to be active on the ground to really, inspire young people and women to be able to share, and so we can be able to contribute to this platform. So that's been my local experience. I've recently moved to the Western Cape to be able to start new farming projects where we're really looking at farms and how we can bring about agricultural and development with social development. So that's been very interesting to see the social landscape of South Africa, how different it is, and how important agriculture is to individuals.
Fantastic. Thank you. And for our audience, they must be listening to every word that you're saying, but we haven't got very many questions in yet. So for all of you listening there, feel free, ask your questions, because this is your space. And one of the things that we often talk about in Nuffield is you never know when you get the chance, but when you do, you have to use it, because it's here and it's now. So tell us your questions, and you've got Peter and Aline, Thato here to give you their points of view. Peter, would you like to tell us a bit about what you've seen in some results of agricultural leadership in Australia that you think are interesting?
Well, excuse me. Can I take one step back first? Because I think there's another aspect of leadership that perhaps is worth noting, and that is what is the measure of good leadership? In other words, what's it all about? And for me, in life and in leadership, you get three types of people, or often they're integrated, and you get the talkers, you get the doers, and you get the achievers. Now, the talking is necessary, of course, because you've got to communicate, but it doesn't get things done. People who have the ability of getting things, doing things, that's an important step along the way. But really, it's the achievements that are the measure of good leadership. And often, we can be distracted by those people that are very good on their feet, talking and inspiring, but it doesn't necessarily end up in achieving results. So I think it's really important to do that. You need to look at leadership in that realm. The whole objective of it is to get an outcome. It's to bring about change. It's about getting the local kindergarten built. It's about sending your kids to a better school or something like that. So leadership's all about ultimately achieving some objective that you set out to do. Now, that goes back to your question, where's some good examples of leadership? It's an interesting, it's one of these things that when you get dropped on, you're not, look, and nothing particularly comes to mind. And I want to say, Sally, that to me, leadership at all levels is important. The person that goes into politics and achieves reform, is he more important than the person at the other end of the scale? And we talked earlier about families, who the person who puts together or in conjunction with other members of the family, a really good stable family unit, because ultimately that's the basis of our society anyway, good family unit. So leadership takes many forms, and I'm always reluctant to say this little bit is more important than that little bit, although the big achievements are obviously important, but the really small achievements that add to the ultimate good of society are just as equally important, because if they don't happen, you know, we don't have a good society and we don't have good outcomes from our society.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Totally.
And you're not going to give me any examples, are you?
No.
Well, can I just take that context a little bit further and add in their self-leadership, you know, because by being the best person to your truest north is a great way to be a reference for yourself and for other people. So if we can't, you know, have our own disciplines, our own northings, and our own, you know, and our own achievements, humble, you know, perhaps even more importantly, then it's hard to be connected to other bigger, different groups, let's call it. Aline, what have you? Will you give us some practical examples, since Peter went, big or small or fat or skinny, of where you've seen some nice achievements in your world?
Oh my God, so many. But I think that Peter went direct on the point that sometimes we are driven from the perspective of the others' expectations, right? And we kind of get lost if we do that. And when we start taking care of ourselves, and what I'm saying is that there was this point of my, I'm not too young, but this life where I had to get the step back. I mean, is that right? A step back? Is that how we say? And somehow it was for outside was a moment where everybody was expecting me as a second generation of a important agricultural company in Brazil, here in Brazil, to, oh, are you gonna lead? Are you gonna be there in the front? And I had no. How am I going to get anywhere if I don't get my family with me, or my marriage with me, and even though it was not a high speed journey, you have sometimes to make everything slow. And if to happen, like, because nowadays others' expectations makes a pressure on our lives, and because everybody can look at you, right? Social media, everybody can talk to you. Sometimes you have to say no for plenty of things that others would say, is she going to say no for something like that? Or maybe just you internalizing something that is, and you have to make a decision to say no. And sometimes it's something just not according to other expectations. But I believe, just as Peter said, that being able to lead yourself, first of all, your what is good in your values and even though you're going to say no, even though you're going, so there was this moment in my life when I had to say no, but every other opportunity that happened later, it was something that I was comfortable with. I was, oh yes, this is the time, even though we're not ready, just like today, having to talk in English, and but yeah, you know, it's like not, you have peace of mind to say yes, not exactly being prepared.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and then Thato, so a different question for you then. What are the principles that guide you as you're leading?
I think leading from Aline, I think being true to yourself and authentic, representing something meaningful. I think once you are grounded, be it some people can be grounded by religion, culture, you know, they're standing in their community. I think once you are grounded and you're authentic, you represent something, you have a passion, you know, and just like Peter was saying, to say, even if you're volunteering for a local church group or if it's a local community, just the fact to say, you know, I'm willing to contribute, I will take out my time and I am result focused. I think those are the things that help, you know, and being comfortable, you know, taking that role. I think that's what's important, because that means you have something that you stand for and something that you strongly believe in and you want to drive through. So I think that is one of the things that centers, you know, around authentic leadership. You have to have the passion behind what you intend to do and why you want to do it.
Thank you. And I'm going to take the opportunity, because I think our audience is really pleased just listening to you, but they must have questions. But do you have a question for each other?
Yes.
Well, can I start then, Sally? Because I think it's a good omen that there's no questions, because we must be giving them all the answers to this point in time. But because of the way it comes into leadership, and it's a really interesting question too, which I've sort of thought about over the years, is what is it that makes Nuffield so successful? Because, you know, Nuffield's pretty good at generating leaders and leadership. And we've seen this all around the world. You know, Nuffield scholars have gone on to take on, you know, some really important roles in both their own nations and within agriculture within their nations, and down to, you know, the smaller areas where leadership's required. But my question is, and particularly to the to Thato and Aline, is what do they think is the key? What makes Nuffield so successful? Here we're part of an organisation that's been going for 72 years. Those who are coming in now are just as enthusiastic as the older members of the Nuffield community who did like me, their scholarship a number of years ago. What is it that sort of binds us together, that drives us to want to come back and serve the organisation? What is it that sort of leads us on to do so many other things in life?
Great question.
Okay. I don't know, Aline, do you want to go first? I think what Aline touched on this earlier, to say that when you interact with someone from Nuffield or at a Nuffield event, you literally have instant access to the rest of the world. And I think there is very few organizations that can really honestly do that, be able to bring diverse views and people into one place. And I think what's been really nice, what Nuffield has done in the recent years, is to really spread the word and go into different countries. And I think when I went to the 2017 CSC in Brazil, I really felt that I was in the room with all sorts of people from different ages. You know, there were people that were similar to my age. There were much older people, you know, men, women. There were much more women. There were a lot of women that I saw. So that was a good thing. And now there's different countries, and now there's developing countries. And I think that was very interesting, a mix of people at that CSC, because now it was so much curiosity people had. You know, some people had never been to Africa itself or South Africa, you know, so there were very pressing questions that people wanted to ask and viewpoints, and obviously very topical things. It doesn't need to be about agriculture. I think really understanding people's political and social views gives a context of how people are, how they behave in business. And I think that's what really helps about Nuffield, and really the opportunity to really experience the world, different cultures. I mean, going on a GFP and traveling to so many countries, you really get to really understand how people do business, how people behave, how they communicate, and really getting an experience of different companies and understand. And what's really nice about that is that, you know, even if you're from one specific sector or industry, you're exposed to different sectors and industries. So it was an opportunity for other people to put themselves in other people's shoes, really understand different industries, but also think on how can I do things differently. And leaving the GFP, going back home, you have all this knowledge inside your head, and the curiosity grows more, you know. And for me, bringing back that knowledge and, you know, besides writing a report, actually going out and disseminating information to people so they can understand the Nuffield experience, what is the value, you know, and really understand, I mean, trying to get, you know, buy-in from people to see what is the importance of really opening this platform to more people and more countries, you know, and how it can, I mean, like Peter said, Nuffield scholars do go onto leadership positions. If there were more people in leadership that have, you know, traveled, seen the world, experienced other people, you know, encountered different languages, then I think that's a positive insight to have people in leadership that have been exposed to that level. So that's just my idea on how I think Nuffield is important, and just reflecting on my own experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thato. Aline.
I believe it's a collection of people full of passion and como é que fala, vontade?
Drive, interested
and desired and self-driven, and one of the precious things that I see on Nuffield nowadays is the trust, trust on the information, the knowledge that is built in that environment, because we are in a moment where we can access information from all over the world, but we are like in a crisis of trust, right? So when it comes to Nuffield, and I don't know if it's something that could be more and more explored, because it's a collection of storytelling companies and stories and truth and this access to all these stories and to the truth, and yeah, and especially for me that I'm dealing with the history of agriculture and dealing to how to preserve this. For example, when it comes to Brazil, this 40 years ago, what happens to nobody? They were all working. They didn't have time to write the story, and we have to promote that. We have to preserve that, and we have this access in Nuffield to true stories and different points of view.
Thank you. And Peter, would you like to quickly answer your own question?
And well, I was hoping you'd ask, because what's quite interesting is that, of course, I grew up, or when I went through Nuffield in 1990, it was a very different organisation to the one it is today. And I had quite a bit to do with creating what is today. So It's been an interesting journey for me. But if you think about it, what's really quite remarkable about Nuffield in the sense of its achievements is that all we do in Nuffield is facilitate people to get together, to travel around the world, to have all these incredible experiences. We don't actually sit down at the beginning and put you through a course of what you should know and what you should believe and all the rest of it. But it's by releasing scholars into the world, facilitating them, giving them the confidence to really grow and learn with this experience that is largely its success. And the interesting thing is that even from those who did theirs the first, there's not too many left now, or there's none left back for those in the early 50s that did their scholarships. Their enthusiasm, the growth that they achieved through the Nuffield experience is just as great as that you have today. So it's really interesting. It's a formula that seems to work. And of course, travel is always one of the great educators in life, to be able to meet people from all different walks of life, from developing countries to the developed countries. So it's a very interesting process, but what it does do is we really give our scholars a magic key to the world, which allows them to go out and discover for themselves and to learn for themselves. And all we do around that is to say, well, look, you've got to come back, you've got to talk to your contemporaries, you've got to write a report on what you learnt and what you went away to study. But it is quite remarkable in the success of the formula. Anyway, that's my comments.
No, this is fantastic. Great. Then we'll just get onto a couple of questions now that are coming in. So this is from Andre. Greetings, Nuffield. Question to Ms. Thato. Are you optimistic about the future of women in agriculture? What are the biggest challenges to reach a more inclusive arena, according to your experience?
I think one of the biggest challenges is access to land and leadership. Those are two. When we look at it twofold, to say that 60% of farmers in Africa are women. So these are women who are doing subsistence farming, feeding their families, being able to, it's a way they can be able to generate money for economic reasons. And on the other flip side, the representation of commercial agriculture is still historically white males in Africa. So there is a need to be able to, first of all, diversify so people can be able to access their economic means of agriculture. And second of all, support women in tenure. Because we know that tenure obviously lies in mostly with males, be it through inheritance, be it through if husband and wife being married in other, cultural marriage, then definitely the ownership or the title would be in the husband's name. So really making sure that policies address equality and promote women in agriculture, from basic things to making sure that, there is overalls for women or gumboots and access to machinery that are best suited for that women can be able to use. It just reminds me of not being able to, weigh enough to be able to sit on a tractor to activate it. There's some tractors that you need to sit on and your weight will help switch it on. So those are basic things to say, how can we bring technology to women so they can be able to be more productive on the land that they have access to already, and how we can really see governments promote land reform policies that are, a bit biased towards women, just purely based on how women, their economic spend. Women are more likely to spend money on their families, going directly to food, education, and they're the most vulnerable group in terms of, not having equal pay, the living in patriarchal society. So we need to look at policies that address and promote women in the developing context, so more women can be able to enter the commercial space and play an important role in the economic sector of agriculture.
Interesting. Aline, do you have something to add from a Brazilian context about women involved in agriculture, if it's an inclusive arena already? If not, what are some of the challenges to make it more so?
I believe it's a matter of time, just a matter of time, because it was, and I don't know if it was a coincidence, the last time that I took a friend of me to know the farm and meet the farm, the 3 in a row employees that I presented him was women, like they were everywhere. So yeah, I of course that I don't know if that's something particular in Brazil that is happening, but I really believe that women and women nowadays are really complementary. Like there is not, when it comes to professional development, is just a matter of desire and desire, and of course being able to face the reality of each challenge, right? Yeah. So
perfect. Peter, do you want to add something from an Australian point of view around that?
Probably I'm not the best one to ask, but my thought was that if you ask my wife about her involvement in agriculture, she'd say she's very much involved. And in our situation, we fulfill very complementary roles in achieving the outcome on the farm. So, our roles are different, but they're very much complementary. And I think what has changed is probably the input of women into agriculture has increased, certainly from my parents' time. But, very much we view our situation as a team effort, and she's as much as part of it as I am.
Yeah, great. And we've got a question here from Jean. Being involved with Nuffield, you have experiences and ideas that provide insight, which may be ahead of where other people around you are, your peers, organizations, etc. And do you have any tips around how to lead through this? So the question is for who would like to start?
I didn't get the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you want me to just repeat the question? They're saying, so when you're around a group of interesting people, for example, through Nuffield, you're exposed perhaps to some ideas, some thinking, some trends that might be different, might be ahead of where your contemporaries, where your regular people that you interact with, where they are at. So how do you lead with this thinking, with the engagement, to introduce these topics and achieve, put some of these thoughts to get their buy-in and make things happen? Peter, we might start with you.
I was going to say it's rather a difficult question, and I think like a lot of these things, leadership's about understanding the people around you, the community you're in, etc. And so I think for those sort of specific examples, you need to be able to find the pathway in if it's something that's worth taking forward and you want to lead that, if you like, mini revolution or whatever you might call it. That is what leadership's about, finding the pathway through to take others with you, to adopt, to include, or whatever you whatever way you want to put it. So it's a very difficult question to be specific about, and that's leadership. It's finding ways to get to the end you want to achieve.
Yeah, thank you. Thato, do you have anything to add there?
I think as a leader, obviously you need to be visionary. That's what Aline was talking about earlier in our conversation. You need to have a vision, you need to have passion. And I think that makes you ahead of your time. You always have to be imaginative and sort of have a dream in your head to say what that thing, should look like, or that outcome should look like. And I think what's important for a leader is being able to, translate that to help other people see that vision, or help them see a step closer to that vision. And I think that's where communication goes in, and that's where, also understanding which type of environment that you are in. And I think that's a very good lesson that you'll learn from Nuffield. You'll interact with farmers who are doing something completely different to you, or doing something similar to you, but at a different scale. So first of all, being humble, receiving that information, but really, contextualizing, what does this mean for me? And if I want to share this with people, how can I help them digest that? And there'll be many things that you'll experience or observe that are ahead of your time. And I think being able to access these platforms also gives you an opportunity to be, that imagination, to be able to think, what is the implications for you at your personal level and environment, and maybe then, adjust how you approach things, or adjust how you can communicate to help other people see your vision, so you can build that team that can be able to execute your vision. So I think it really comes down to communication and how you can be dynamic in the environments that you are presented.
Thank you. And Aline, do you have something to add?
Just something that I remember when we received a Nuffield group in Bom Futuro, that one asked me, could you ship a container with soybeans for us in Europe to my company here in Europe? And for those who know soybeans, of course, big ship, and there is, of course, no logical logistic for that. Still now on, but it's just like a sort of thing that happens and makes you think about it for days and days, and maybe it's not the time, it's still not the time, but yeah, it's one of what happens in this moment of when you see the future. Yeah.
Days and days and years, because I think I was with you when we had this conversation. It was like,
oh my God,
4 years ago.
Yeah.
So he sowed the seed for you. We have a question here from Erickson. Perhaps this is our last question, looking at the time. Thato, in recent years, Brazil has come closer to African countries commercially. How do you think about this relationship between these countries as a leader in agribusiness?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think Brazil and South Africa are pretty similar. My experience going there during the CSC and spending a little bit of time after the CSC made me realize that there's very much similarities, both historically and currently. And I think South Africa has a lot to learn from Brazil. And I think that there's also been a transference of information from South African farmers going to Brazil and Brazilian farmers coming to South Africa. And I think the push of commercial agriculture, being able to exploit the land and the resources that we have, I think that's one central key and what really connects us at an economic level. And I think what could improve between that is obviously open communication and dialogue. I feel like sometimes media can be opportunistic in terms of not understanding, trade agreements, and obviously now there's a lot of questioning by local farmers to say that, South Africans should be able to grow their own and shouldn't import. So there's now people having dialogues, but I think these are issues that can be sorted out by farmers, sitting down and, transferring information, being able to connect trade better, to be able to focus on commodities that are beneficial from both sides, and we also leverage the opportunities in livestock and how I think that's one pretty untapped market when it comes to that connection with South America and South Africa, is really building on the possibilities that can happen with businesses working together. So I think we need more active partnerships. We need more educational bodies, research bodies, actually, to be able to be working together. I think what I saw in Brazil is sort of that there's a lot happening in Brazil, there's a lot happening in South Africa, but there isn't that communication between, and especially in some research bodies. And I think that will open up so much, because, if we can do trials on genetic varieties, how we can improve indigenous varieties, I think those are very key topics for those individual countries. So I think that there's a lot of possibility, and I think the Nuffield experience also can help as a bridge to be able to allow that open communication and dialogue between farmers. So I'm pretty excited. I was pretty excited interacting with Brazilian farmers and seeing what are they doing, understanding what Brazilian companies are doing. And really, it's really motivation for South African companies to be competitive, to be able to learn from the advances that are happening in Brazil, learn about, how Brazil has developed into this agricultural powerhouse, because Africa is pretty untapped. It hasn't got to that sophisticated level in entirety, and it's very segmented. So I think the way that Brazilian companies have been able to work together, how Brazilian companies have been able to have generational knowledge being passed down and commercialized, I think that's going to be very valuable information in developing agriculture in developing countries.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, I am very conscious of the time, and unfortunately, it's we've already had our hour together. So I just, for the audience here, just remember that this has been recorded on YouTube, and there's a bunch of other Nuffield Talks webinars there, some in Portuguese and some in English. So they make a great podcast if you're driving or going for a run or something like that, as well as watching in a video form. So this will stay recorded that you think should be listening to this, and we look forward to having you along at the next Nuffield Talks. We'll just get some final remarks through from our three panelists. But yeah, Peter, we might just start with you.
Well, Sally, I've been thinking about this, and it came to mind, a wise old uncle of mine said that you go to school to learn how to learn. I think with Nuffield, you learn how to lead.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. What do you got to add there, Aline?
Oh my God.
No, just your final remarks, please.
Yeah.
I didn't mean like that.
You should have leave Peter for the last one. I can say that it was a pleasure to share with you, and I would, the last thing I would like to ask Peter is that if he would give us any advice, if he could give an advice for someone like us to commit at least less mistakes, or because every day we are learning so much. And yes, that's my final thoughts.
The perfect final thoughts from a curious person is a question. Peter, would you like to respond to that, please?
Well, I in the end, I wasn't quite sure what the question was, but no, it's look, in Nuffield, there's you know, it keeps on giving. That's the wonderful thing about it, and it's a life learning experience, and I think it doesn't stop whatever your age, and that's the great thing about it. But I'm sorry, Aline, I didn't really answer your question, but there you go.
Yeah, if you have something to say to yourself, for example, what would be an advice for you, like 30 years ago or something like that? What would you say to yourself?
Aline, I've taken all my own advice.
Sorry?
I've taken all my own advice already.
Yeah? Oh, okay.
No, but she wants to know for herself, what would you say to your 30-year-old self if you were talking to him now, that you know that might be relevant for someone like Aline?
No,
She might take
that's a really hard question. I don't know. I mean, you're constantly evolving through your life as you learn, and I'd have to take that on advice, Aline. I'll send you my answer via email, I think.
Great, thank you. And I will share all my stories.
Okay.
Perfect. They need to be told.
Following us.
So I think that maybe the answer is there's no magic bullet. No secret recipe. But a journey worth committing to and taking. And Thato, some concluding remarks, or perhaps a question from you if you've got one burning.
In terms of remarks, I think it's very important to be authentic and represent something meaningful. I think that's how we all connect to people. You know, I think we don't face challenges in isolation. There's somebody out there that has similar challenges. So if we internalize that and we're authentic about it, I think we can be a leader in your own personal space. And yeah, and in terms of, I don't have any questions. I think just remarks in the session that it was very nice and interactive and diverse. And it was very great to hear Peter's and Leni's insight. Yeah,
wonderful. No, it was. Thank you all. Thank you to the three of you. You know, from Australia, early morning, and Thato, it's midnight, so ready to go to bed. Yes. You know, three very active people in their own worlds and completely willing to spend their time here with us today on Nuffield Talks. And if I can just leave by saying a very special opportunity that we have for Brazilians, for Americans, for Chileans, Japanese, and Germans is a Nuffield scholarship. It's for 2021. The applications are open until the 15th of October, and this scholarship has been created in part because no man is an island, but in part because of the vision and the execution of this man with us today, which if you're within the criteria, then please make sure you apply. And if you're connected to the spirit of Nuffield, then we need you to be involved in making it richer in your country. So thank you to everyone for your participation. Thank you again to our three great panelists, and we look forward to connecting with the next Nuffield Talks. So for me, thank you and good night.
Goodbye.